in.
Come on, everybody, grab a seat, grab a seat. We got another unbelievable speaker coming to drop some knowledge.
All
and
right.
it just so happens that...
No. All right, so I'm going to tell a little story before I bring her up on stage. So I have two little girls at home. And since they've been born, we have this tradition. Every month that it's their birthday, at any given point of the month, we can walk around and we can say, "It's your birthday, it's your birthday, it's your birthday," and then everybody else says, "Woo!" And today happens to be the birthday of our very next speaker, who is also just an awesome neuroscientist, and she's going to talk to us all about routine and why it's important and when it's not. But before she comes up here, I'm going to lead the charge. And when I get to the woo part, you're all going to help me, and we're going to bring her on stage with an awesome birthday message. You ready? All right, I'm going to introduce Emily. It's your birthday, it's your birthday, it's your birthday. Woo!
All right. Let's go. Come on up.
Thank you for the birthday wishes. My birthday was yesterday, but it's all the same. It's all the same. I'm celebrating my birthday here with you guys today. So hi, everyone. My name is Emily McDonald. I am a neuroscientist. I studied neuroscience in the lab for over 4 years. I researched a bunch of different things, and I have 2 degrees in neuroscience now, but I don't actually work in the lab full-time anymore. Now I do many different things, but I'm most well-known for being M on the brain on social media. And on social media, I talk about all things neuroscience, the brain, mental wellness, and mindset. So just to begin, I kind of want to give you guys a little tip. It doesn't really have anything to do with my speech today, but it has a lot to do with fitness, and that's why we're all here. And there's room because it's not so crowded in here anymore, so you guys are really going to be able to use this tip. And I'm not going to tell you what it does yet. I want you all to be surprised. So if everyone will hold their arms out in a T like this, and pay attention to how far your arms can go. Yeah, like how far back they can go. Pay attention to that. Okay, so now you can put them back down. And now, without moving, I love that they're even doing it in the back, without moving your head, keep your head super still and straight. Use just your eyes to look as far to the right as you can, and without moving your head. So keep it straight, and then just look to your right as far as you can. And now look to the left as far as you can with just your eyes, without moving your head. And then up with just your eyes, without moving your head. And then down, as far as you can. Okay, and so now everyone hold your arms back out in the T again. And notice how far back they can go now. And it might not be as effective because we're here and we're a little restricted. But if you notice that you can actually move your arms further back now after you've expanded your visual field. And that works because we have an area of the brain called the cerebellum, and it has inhibitory projections that kind of restrict our range of motion. And through doing those visual field exercises, we're actually broadening our physical field and our physical range of motion, which is just a super cool, fun way to improve our fitness abilities as well. So you can do that before strength training, before yoga, before stretching, before working out, so you can use your entire lengths of your muscles. And it's a really great example for me of how we can use neuroscience and use tools like that to improve our lives, and it's super easy. And so today, I'm going to talk to you all about why we're all superhuman. All of you guys are superhuman with superhero abilities through the power of neuroplasticity. And I'm going to talk to you about why routine is important, except for when it's not important. What do I mean by we're superhuman with superhero abilities? Well, I have a funny story, actually. So in my very first year in my PhD program, I was in my very first class. Molecular neuroscience was the class, and my professor was the head of the entire neuroscience department, and he's this older German guy, super tough and uptight. And me being me, I went up to him, and I said to him, "Do you think that if we were wired differently, that we could fly?" And it seems kind of dumb, but he actually, to my surprise, he said yes. He said, yeah, we could fly if we were wired differently. And that kind of solidified my belief that we can really do anything as long as we believe in ourselves, and we can really achieve whatever we want to achieve as long as we believe in our abilities to do so. And we use the power of neuroplasticity to wire these things in. And what do I mean by wire things into our brain? Like, what did I mean if we were wired differently, could we fly? So that kind of ties into neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity is super cool, and it really does give us superpowers, and it's when you understand how it works, you can use it in all aspects of your life to improve your life and your performance and the way that you think, behave in all situations. So who here knows what neuroplasticity is? Cool, okay. So for those of you guys that don't know what neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt and rewire. And rewire is kind of an abstract term, but basically we have neurons in the brain, and they form pathways. And these pathways, they connect all these different brain areas. And when these pathways become stronger or weaker, we can actually change the way that we think and that we behave and that we act and react in all situations. And it's not just pathways, it's also individual connections within brain areas as well. So for example, the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is right here, and it's really important for executive functioning and impulse control. And so for me, I grew up having ADHD, and it was really hard for me to control my impulses. And so maybe I didn't have as strong of a prefrontal cortex as other people. And so what could I do to improve my impulse control? Well, I can strengthen my prefrontal cortex. And how can we do that? Mindfulness meditation. So I started practicing mindfulness meditation for years now, it's been, and over time now I'm at the point where I have strengthened my prefrontal cortex and I don't have trouble with impulse control anymore. And actually I have one of those Muse EEG headbands. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Muse. But I actually, it's a gamification version, and they give you a percentage of the time that you are in control of your mind. And I'm really proud of my score on that. So I've been able to strengthen my prefrontal cortex that way. And that's just one example of how we can use neuroplasticity to rewire our brains and get more in control of our lives. And so we can use it to be more in control of our lives and our behaviors, but we can also use it to change the way that we experience life. And this is really cool. So what do I mean by experience life? So the way that vision works, this kind of blew my mind when I first heard it put this way. But we actually don't see with our eyes. We don't see with our eyes. Our eyes, they take in light signals, and then those light signals travel back to the visual cortex. And the image is still not an image yet. So once it gets to the visual cortex, then it goes through all of these different brain areas where our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, our memories, and our ideas of the future, those are all incorporated before the image is put together that we see. And so we don't actually see with our eyes, we see with our minds. Our brains put together the image, and we see with our mindset. And this is actually super cool and super helpful because we can use it to change the way that we see life and change the way that we see ourselves. So through mirror work, I was able to completely change the way that I see myself. I didn't always see myself as how I see myself now. So I was able to incorporate things like mirror work and positive self-talk and positive affirmations in the mirror to change the way that my brain associates myself with my image. And so now I see myself in a completely new light. And so with that example, I'm kind of telling you how I had to step outside my comfort zone, and I had to do new things in order to rewire my brain, and I had to do these things so that I could activate neuroplasticity and change my mind. And so neuroplasticity, we really need to use it to our advantage. And so how else can we use it to our advantage? Where else is neuroplasticity really important? Well, let's talk about habits, because habits are something that everybody always asks me about. So when I was in the lab, I studied addiction during my PhD. And through my studies, something that is super important, and this is a brain fact that honestly everyone should know, and when you understand this, you can really change your life with this, and I'm coining this, like this is something that I talk about all the time, but the brain is an association machine. And what does that mean? So for a habit, right, how does a habit get formed? So there's a cue that triggers us to do a behavior, and then that behavior leads to a positive outcome that's rewarding, and it increases dopamine, and then that dopamine drives us to keep doing it, and dopamine also drives neuroplasticity and helps ingrain things into our brains. And so for fitness, for an example, right? So the cue might be going to the gym. We go to the gym, that's the cue, that's the environmental cue, and then that triggers us to work out, and then that workout leads to dopamine and positive feelings, and that dopamine and positive feelings leads to motivation that makes us keep wanting to go back to the gym. And that's how a habit is formed. It's really just a positive association with a cue or a trigger. But what about breaking a habit? How do we break habits? So this is a little more complicated, and the sad truth is that we don't live in Men in Black movie. We can't just like zap people's minds and erase things from our brains. If we could do that, addiction wouldn't be a thing. But what can we do? So what we can do is that we can change associations in our brain. So remember how I just said our brain associates the gym with the workout and a positive feeling that makes us wanting to keep go back? Well, let's say I wanted to break your habit of going to the gym. Well, what would I do? So I want to change the association that you have with the gym. So now let's say like I make the gym smell so bad. And now every time you go to the gym, you smell this horrible smell, and it makes you feel terrible. Well, over time, your brain is going to associate the gym with a bad feeling now, and over time, that new association with the negative feeling is going to overpower the old one with the positive feeling, and now you don't want to go to the gym anymore. And so making a new association to replace the old one is really the only way, or the best way that I know to break a habit and instill a new one. But how do we instill this new one? How do we make this new association strong so that we can instill it into our brains and make it a habit? Well, there's two things that we need to do to replace a habit, and that is one, reinforcement, so rewarding ourselves for doing this new positive behavior. It's going to lead to dopamine, which leads to neuroplasticity and ingraining things into the brain. And then the second thing is repetition. We have to repeat things in order to make these connections stronger in our brain and make the association stronger. And that is what the answer to why routine is important. So we're going to start with routine being important, and then I'm going to switch it up on you guys and tell you why it's not important. So routine actually gives us superpowers. Routine makes our lives, helps us take control of our lives and do behaviors with little to no mental effort or energy. It's like brushing your teeth. Like, you don't fight yourself to brush your teeth every morning. You just reap the benefits daily. So we can do that with all of our different behaviors, right? So for me, an example is people always tell me I'm so disciplined. I would go to the grocery store with my best friend in Arizona, and she would always she'd be like, oh, she has such a sweet tooth, and she would always want ice cream. And she'd be like, Emily, like, do you want ice cream? And I'd be like, no, I don't really want ice cream. She'd be like, Emily, like, I don't know how you stay so disciplined. And for me, I don't really see it as discipline. I see it as two things, and it's wired into my brain now so that I don't even have to think about it, which is an example of how wiring things into your brain can be so helpful for you. But one, I always ask myself, what would future Emily want? What would future Emily appreciate? Looking out for myself in the future, to me, is a lot more rewarding to look out for myself in the future and be my own angel on my shoulder than some instant gratification that a couple hours later, future Emily's going to be like, damn, I wish I didn't do that. And then the second thing is that I look at discipline as an act of self-love. So for that reason, like I just said, it's more rewarding for me to show myself and my future self and take care of myself in the future than it is to just eat some ice cream. And you never know. I mean, maybe sometimes it is rewarding to do that, and I let myself do that, and then future Emily would appreciate me doing that because it was fun and I enjoyed it, and sometimes we just need to do things for fun. But those are two ways that I was able to wire discipline into my brain and make my life easier. And now that I've wired those things into my brain, I don't have to try to be disciplined anymore. It just kind of happens, and it's automatic. And that's kind of why routine can be so helpful and repetition can be so helpful, and it's so important. So what are some things, what my neuroscience non-negotiables for routine, three things that I do every single day that are absolutely necessary to wire into the brain. Number one is morning sunlight, getting sunlight in your eyes as soon as you wake up in the morning. It sets a biological clock for melatonin release at night, which is super important for sleep, and sunlight is also associated with positive mood. We actually have vitamin D receptors super close to serotonin receptors, so mood boosting effects. It also increases dopamine to get outside and get sunlight first thing in the morning. Super important. Second thing is exercise, of course. Exercise does many things. It increases norepinephrine, it increases dopamine, so we get focus and energy. But the third thing that it does, and I never hear anyone talk about it, but it actually increases endocannabinoid production. And what are endocannabinoids? So when cannabis enters the body, it binds cannabinoid receptors. And we actually have molecules in our body that are produced called endocannabinoids, cannabinoids made from within. And so we have when we work out, endocannabinoids become boosted. And so we get a natural high and natural pain relief from exercise. I mean, nobody ever talks about that. People always tell me, like, Emily, like, are you high? Actually, I get that comment a lot on my YouTube videos. Like, are you high? And I'm like, yes, I'm high on life. My endocannabinoids are up. But that's the second thing. And then the third thing is a mindfulness activity. So like I was saying earlier, I meditate every day, and I meditate right after I exercise. And that's a personal choice for me. The order doesn't necessarily matter, but I just find that exercise helps clear my mind, and then I find it easier to actually meditate and keep my mind clear. And so how can we do these things and incorporate these things and make them habits and make them a routine? Well, we can do something called habit stacking. And habit stacking is a great way to build new habits because, like I was talking about earlier, how our habits form. We have a cue that triggers us to do a behavior, and then we get a positive outcome. Well, habit stacking takes advantage of maybe habits that you already had. So I've always worked out. Fitness has always been super important to me in my life. And so for me, I already had that in my routine. So when I wanted to start meditating, I started a few years ago, but when I wanted to start meditating, it wasn't easy for me to just start meditating. So what did I do? I chose a trigger that would trigger me to meditate that I already have in my routine. And so my trigger was exercise. And so now as soon as I exercise, I'm triggered to meditate, and that's a way that I've stacked those habits to incorporate them into a routine, and it's wired in now. It's made it so much easier. The second way that we can incorporate things into our routines and make that easier is to use association. So like I was saying before, our brains are association machines. Our brains are always looking for connections and ways to make connections. So what is an example of this? A workout playlist. I'm sure a lot of you guys probably have workout playlists. So when I listen to my workout playlist, my brain immediately goes into like this super insane, energetic, excited state because I'm so excited to work out, and my brain has learned to associate that music with the positive outcome of exercise. And so my brain has that connection made automatically, and I immediately get a sense of energy from that music. And then I also do the same thing with focus. So I've been listening to the same playlist actually for 6 years. Since the very beginning of undergrad, I have listened to the same instrumental playlist on Spotify, and now, as soon as I put that playlist on, my mind immediately goes into a super focused state, and the sense of power that I have over my mind because of the way that I've wired these associations in is insane. I am able to get myself into a focused flow state at the click of a button on my phone by playing this playlist. It's crazy. So that's just an example of how you can use associations to make your life so much easier and gain control over your mind. So routine is really important, and wiring things in and repetition, all of that is really important, but there's a catch. So remember when I said that dopamine is released when we get a reward, and then that drives motivation and neuroplasticity? Well, the thing about rewards and dopamine is that our brains become desensitized to those rewards. When things become routine or predictable, we don't get as much dopamine from those things anymore. And it makes sense intuitively. So like, what's your favorite dessert? Cookies and cream. Okay. So you probably don't eat cookies and cream very often. But when you do, you get a lot of dopamine from that. But let's say now I'm gonna make you eat it every single day. At first, you're gonna be really happy and excited about that. But then over time, your brain is gonna learn and adapt, and it's gonna become predictable and routine, and now it's not your favorite dessert anymore, and you don't really like it that much. And that applies to everything in life. It applies to fitness, it applies to our routines, because the truth is that our routines become our comfort zones. And we don't get neuroplasticity from our comfort zone. That's why they say growth happens outside of our comfort zone, because we don't get dopamine in our comfort zone. We don't get neuroplasticity in our comfort zone. We're not activating our brains in our comfort zone, in our routines. We have to step outside our routines in order to activate neuroplasticity, get dopamine, and continue to grow and stay young, because activating our brain, activating neuroplasticity is how we stay young and how we stay sharp. And so that's why we need to break our routines in order to learn and grow and stay young and sharp. But we don't have to completely destroy our routines. We don't have to do that. We just need to incorporate ways to introduce novelty and flexibility into our routines so that we can continue to activate our brains and get neuroplasticity. So what are some ways that we can do that? How can we increase dopamine? Well, 3 ways to increase dopamine and motivation in our routines. 1, reinforcement, rewards, like I was saying. So we get a lot of dopamine from rewards. If we have a new habit that we want to do or something that we want to incorporate into our routine, introducing a reward to increase dopamine, a different reward than what we're used to, increase dopamine, is a really great way to boost motivation. Second way is novelty. Novelty is huge, and you can use it to your advantage, especially in fitness, and I'll tell you how I do it, especially when things are rewarding and new. So I go to the gym all the time, and I love my gym, but I start to lose motivation, and sometimes it's not as fun as exciting as I'd want it to be. So let's say it's leg day. Well, I'll go on TikTok and search up glute workouts, and I'll find a new glute workout that I haven't tried before, and that'll make me super excited to go to the gym and try this new move. And I'll be so excited and motivated to go to the gym, try this new move. Another example is, so at my apartment, my gym is insane. We actually have a wellness director in my building, and I've been bothering him ever since I moved in because there's no hip abductor machine, and I love that machine. It's awesome. So I've been telling him to get me this machine, and he actually got it, and it just got delivered the day before I flew out here, and so I am so excited to get back to the gym at home so I can try this new machine. And so that's another way that novelty can boost motivation and boost dopamine. The third thing is anticipation. So a lot of people don't realize that dopamine, yes, it's rewards, but it's also anticipation and craving. Craving is dopamine. So how can we use anticipation to increase dopamine and motivation and keep our brains young and active? Well, we can do something like setting small goals more often. So what a lot of people do a lot of times is they'll set these huge weight loss goals or fitness goals, and that is amazing, and we'll feel so motivated in the beginning and so energized to do what we want to do, but then over time, our motivation starts to just kind of fall off, and maybe we don't ever even accomplish that goal. But if we set smaller, more frequent goals, we can take advantage of multiple frequent waves of dopamine and motivation rather than one big wave that kind of dies off over time. So that's another way. And then another way to activate our brain and introduce neuroplasticity is by switching locations. An environment and location is actually so important for our mindsets. When I was an undergrad, I studied learning and memory, and specifically we looked at how we organize events in time depending on the location that we're in. And what we found was that we actually perceive time differently depending on the location that we're in. If we switch contexts, we'll perceive that more time happened than it actually did. And that's just time. So the area of the brain that's really important for learning and memory, the hippocampus, it's also the same brain area that's really important for spatial location and creating a mental map. So we have cells in our hippocampus that fire when we're in certain places. So like as I walk around the stage, like I have different cells that are like, oh, she's here, she's here, she's here, and it's creating a mental map for me. And so our environment and our location is always being incorporated into how we learn and remember things because it's the same brain area. And so, and I talked about this actually on social media once, and somebody commented and said that they were not able to reach their fitness goals until they switched gyms. And I can speculate that this is for 2 reasons. One, because it got him outside of his comfort zone, and it got him really motivated and uncomfortable, and that made him step up in a way that maybe he wouldn't have at his gym where he was comfortable. And the second reason is because of, like I said, the brain is an association machine. So at his new gym, his brain didn't have any subconscious associations to his old self. So that's kind of why it's the reason why I wanted to move after I graduated from grad school, because I wanted to be able to level up in a way that where I was now is the new baseline, and there's absolutely no subconscious ideations holding me back to reaching a new level. So if I switch to a new gym, now my level of fitness where I'm at right now, this is the baseline, and I have no associations holding me back to maybe my less fit self. I only have the new associations that I want to build in. And that's super powerful, and switching environments is super powerful for your mindset and upgrading your life and incorporating new habits. It's super easy to build new habits if you switch locations because of the association thing. And so that's why routine is not important and why we need to introduce flexibility and novelty into our routines. And so just to wrap it up, I just want all of you guys to remember that you're all superhumans with superpowers. You just need to leverage neuroplasticity and dopamine to wire things into the brain, and use routine to wire things into the brain through repetition. But also remember that you need to incorporate novelty and flexibility so that you can continue to activate your brain and continue to stay young and motivated and super strong and fit. Thank you guys so much. Do I need to take questions, or? I think I still have 5 minutes if anyone has anything that they want to, yeah. Yeah. So that whole paralysis thing, for me, it would often come from being overwhelmed because there's so much stimulation. That's kind of the thing with ADHD, is that we're so stimulated. For me, whenever I would feel really overwhelmed, I would always, I do something called zooming out, and I'll take an alien's perspective. So I'll go up into outer space and pretend I'm an alien and look down at myself and be like, is any of that stuff actually important? And it gives me a whole new perspective on where I am, and it puts me back in my place so that I can focus on the task at hand. Also, doing things like brain dumps are super helpful to just like put it all out there, and that way I can actually see what's going on and staying organized, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of things. Right now, a lot of the psychedelic research is really exciting for me, especially when it comes to anxiety and trauma research. Super exciting about that. Honestly, continuing to research. Actually, I was talking to a journalist yesterday about it and talking about resiliency and why some people go through post-traumatic stress resilience and they're able to grow from it, and some people have post-traumatic stress disorder and it actually hinders them from growing, and looking at what the differences in the brain are and how we can help people grow from experiences that are traumatic instead of getting super anxious and, you know, holding you back from growing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys.